everyone, and welcome back to Play, Pause, Rewind. We are on episode 16 now. We are going to be talking about The Green Knight. Niles, how was your weekend? We're recording this Monday night, which is different for us.
It was great. I mean, I got to help you move into your new place.
Yes.
That would explain the different background if you guys are watching on video. But yeah, I had a good weekend. Read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, or at least read most of it, and some reviews and lots of source material, and did some other things, lots of meal prep. How was your weekend, Dylan?
Busy. As Niles alluded to, I have moved. That's why this room is so bare bones. It will eventually look more interesting. But hopefully, in the near future, we'll be able to record this in person because I now have the room to do that. So Once we figure out the equipment and everything like that, hopefully we'll be able to be in the same room. The conversation will probably flow a little bit better that way. But for the meantime, we are still virtual. And we both saw this movie, almost 6 weeks ago now, or whenever it came out.
Something like that.
It's been a little bit, but and Niles, as he mentioned, read the book or reread the book. I read it a long time ago when I was in second or third grade, so I remember very little. But without going too long, let's start with non-spoilers, and we'll go into spoilers.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's get this Green Knight show on the road. The Green Knight is a movie that just came out from A24 Studios, kind of an independent film there. And, the leading character, Sir Gawain, is it pronounced Gawain? I'm going to pronounce
I think it depends on the version. It's either Gawain or Gawain.
I like Gawain, so I'm going to say Gawain.
That's what I always said, too.
Yeah, and I mean, Dev Patel, he's the lead actor in this film, and he did a fantastic job with it. It's so great. It just kind of blew me away the whole time. I was kind of gagging at the atmospheric elements of it. It was just stunning visually. His acting was superb, and I'm an English major by heart. That's what I studied in college, and now look at me, I'm doing a podcast. And so, it was nice to see a story that I had read in school being presented on the big screen. It was just so interesting to just watch this film and see this story come to life on screen.
Yeah. And for those who did not know, Sir Gawain is a Knight of the Round Table. This is a story from Arthurian legend, and I really loved it. It's not for everyone. It's very much, I don't think slow is the right word, but it's very contemplative. It is like a guy has to go somewhere, and he goes there, and he has a couple run-ins on the way, and that is the plot. So if plot is your main driving force for a movie, may not be for you. The Rotten Tomatoes score certainly suggests that to be the case because the fan score is very, very low in contrast to the critic score, which is very high.
That's interesting.
Yeah. If you think if you go in thinking you're going to get the Lord of the Rings, which the marketing does not promise you, but people make up their mind about things, and you get this, you're going to be upset because this is about it's more about the internal journey of the man rather than the external journey, for sure. But visually, very stunning. Cinematography, I would describe as patient. It's willing to linger on a single shot for a very long time. And I enjoyed that a lot. I also wanted to, before we dive into the movie and comparisons to the original story, give a brief little history of the story itself because it is kind of interesting, I think. So the Green Knight is based off of the chivalric romantic poem called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Yep, there it is. There's the Tolkien version. And a chivalric poem is a literary genre that was popular in the medieval ages, focused mostly on honorable knights going on a quest, and it talked about their honor a lot, basically. And this particular poem is from the late 14th century, written in Middle English, and only one copy of that manuscript survives. Somehow it survived a fire, too. There's a great little three-minute video narrated by Ralph Ineson, who voices the Green Knight, going into the history of the text. But it's the manuscript survived, and it was translated into modern English by J.R.R. Tolkien of Lord of the Rings fame, Simon Armitage, and some others. And there have been adaptations in movie form, stage form, etc. And so that is how we have this story today. This very old story. Oh, and no one knows who wrote it. The original version. The author is unknown.
No one knows. It's a total mystery. And, like, I mean, I did some research on this, too, but there's a lot of speculation about who this guy was. And, you know, from what it sounds like, he was kind of a contemporary of Chaucer.
Okay.
If I remember my reading correctly. But, you know, they kind of wrote about similar tales of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So they were around the same time in the focusing on that medieval age and those honorable knights going around and doing these heroic quests. But yeah, the author, complete mystery. They know that he was kind of similar to Chaucer, that he was like obviously a man. Well, actually, I mean, obviously, I don't know if I could say obviously.
Yeah, who knows?
But, you know, considering that, you know, men had all the
yeah.
power. Yes, men had all the power. He was a man. He was a white man. He was privileged. But we don't know much about him. But yeah, it's kind of crazy that this story has it perpetuated throughout the ages, considering that the author is unknown. He's anonymous. No one. He's been long dead, and he probably has no idea that his tale would have become what it is today. You know?
No, probably not. It was just part of the like Arthurian legend canon, so to speak, I guess. But and the Arthurian legend is like odd because things contradict each other in different versions and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, it's like it's a very loose canon, and there are different interpretations, as we see in this movie, which we'll talk about a little bit in spoilers. But I guess briefly, like to finish off non-spoilers, I think this is great. I would recommend it mostly, but know what you're getting into. It's not an action-adventure movie, so if you want that, this is not it. But if you want a movie that showcases great acting, is very beautiful, and is kind of, I don't know, like, it's just an interesting visual and emotional experience if you're willing to sit for that and watch.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that and say that this film is, like Dylan said, it's not for everyone, but I think it's also a film that's going to make you think a lot. It's a film that's not action and adventure, it's contemplative, like Dylan said. It's very it's focusing on the themes, and it's focusing on the psychological journey and the internal struggles of the human character. It's not focused on, oh, am I going to beat, you know, the Green Knight? Am I going to beat him in this duel? It's more prepping. It's about, you know, the psychological trauma, what you're getting through to get to that point at the end of the hero's journey. Because this is, at the end of the day, just the hero's journey. It's
right.
He leaves home, he goes on an adventure, and then the story kind of ends when he meets the
it's about honor. It's about honor and interrogating what honor really means, and it kind of almost calls bullshit on a lot of old classical like knights, like chivalrous knight stories, because it always and I can't say too much without spoiling it. But also the plot of this movie is very light. There's not a ton to spoil, but, well, it depends on what you consider. But I think we should transition over.
Let's just get into it, yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those spoilers. I think, like, first, right off the bat, you know, it might help to just kind of synthesize the plot. So, you know, if you're familiar with the tale, then you know that it's just King Arthur's court of Camelot. They're gathered for Yule or Christmas.
For Christmas, yeah. It's Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. In the books, or in the poem, it is like technically Yule or the New Year.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of both. It's slash, you know. But the Green Knight shows up. He's this knight who's come from this land far away, and he's all dressed in green, and he's very natural looking, and he challenges King Arthur's court to this challenge of, you know, one strike for a strike. You hit me, and then a year later, I get to hit you back. And Gawain volunteers, cleaves the head, and then the knight stands up, picks up his head, and says, 1 year, and he runs off going, ha 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 ha, you know?
And in the story, he is a man, right? The Green Knight is a man dressed in green. right?
It's up to interpretation for
Okay.
sure. There's a lot of descriptive elements in there of what he is. Like he's got this crazy looking beard, but he doesn't have any armor from what I recall.
Oh, okay.
I might need to reread that a little bit more closely, but the poet goes into great description about what he looks like and all that stuff. But yes, he is all in green. Like if I remember correctly, even his horse is green. He's just kind of this green guy. And then in the film, Sir or Gawain, not yet Sir, but
Yeah.
Gawain, he's not a knight yet. He goes on these adventures a year later to get to the Green Knight's Chapel to finish out his quest. And so he, along the way, he gets robbed by these hoodlums. He gets he has to go on this, or he doesn't have to do it, but he helps out this ghost retrieve her head from the water that was wrongly put there. He arrives at this one castle, and he's hosted by this lord, and he's just a few miles away from the chapel where he's supposed to meet the Green Knight to have his beheading ceremony. And he undergoes a trial there of kind of reducing the temptation, or messing up my speech here, of saying no to the temptations put forward by the woman of the household. And then eventually gets to this climax at the end where he has to kind of evaluate his own self-worth and own up to what he agreed to, which was the beheading with the Green Knight. And that's kind of where the story ends.
And while you were going back through it, I actually realized like how episodic this movie is, and it falls, and I was reminded of a term one of my English teachers used back in high school. This story is a picaresque, and is picaresque, and that is an episodic style of fiction dealing with the adventures of a rough and dishonest but appealing hero. Which, in this interpretation of the story, Gawain is more rough around the edges than he classically is. We mentioned honor and non-spoilers, but where in the original story, it is more about testing and maintaining one's honor. The movie is very much about earning one's honor. Gawain is not a knight. He is kind of a shithead, in my opinion. Like he, and we'll talk about this more specifically when we talk about Elisa Vikander's role, but he has a woman who is very clearly interested in him romantically, Essel. She is a prostitute. They sleep together, but she clearly wants more. He doesn't seem to give a shit. And it's really uncomfortable, the degree to which he blows her off. Like, she's basically asking him if they'll get married at one point. And he's just, like, looking off into the middle distance. And then the scene ends. And that is never resolved.
What a fuckboy.
Yeah, so it is interesting because he has these various adventures with different people. First, he has the stranger on the road who does him a favor. He gives him directions and he wants a gift in return. And Gawain does not provide a gift, and then he is robbed by that same guy.
Right.
And then he has the adventure with the ghost girl, and he helps her out, which is a great visual scene, by the way. Like, he dives into the small pond, and then it becomes this immense ocean beneath him as he's in the water. And but picaresque. This is a picaresque story, which is kind of neat.
That's a neat word. I hadn't really heard that before, so I like that. But yeah, what I really like about this film is that it takes some good creative liberties with the text as well. In the story, in the poem, it's actually kind of frustrating how little it goes into detail about the adventures that he goes on to get to the chapel.
Okay.
We get none of that. It's very briefly described. It's like, oh, he goes off and he fights some giants, and he has some adventures with such and such, and with what's his name or whatever. He does these things. Yeah. But really, what happens in the poem is that there's three main events. It's the things that happen at Camelot, and then it moves on to the events that happen at that castle with him and the woman
and the Lord.
And the hunting. Yes, the Lord of the Lading and him going off and hunting and everything, and then the scene at the chapel at the end.
Okay.
Those are the three main events, and there might be some stuff there that I'm forgetting, but a lot of it is just kind of spent like talking about clothing, talking about how things like came into being, like at the start with like the British Empire, and like talking about like it's just being really descriptive with like, oh, this is how the knight was dressed, and this is the pentacle shield that he had. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, I appreciate that in the film, you know, he added that scene of the robbery because I think it makes Gawain a little bit more interesting. It strips him of all the accessories that protect him, like the shield and the sword and the chainmail and everything, and now he's just bare naked and alone.
Well, and it shows how weak he is without all of the getup. Like,
yeah,
as soon as he is as soon as the regalia is stripped away, it's like, I'm not a knight. I'm not a knight. Just let me go. I'm fine. Like, I have nothing. It's like,
yeah,
it drops immediately. Like, everything he's supposed to stand for. And he's posturing in the beginning of the movie, you know, when he's riding away from town and the little kids are like following after him. One, he's being kind of a dick because they want something, they like want some recognition, and he just like holds his head high and walks straight away.
saunters.
Because his quest is go die. That's his objective. So he clearly doesn't want to do it, so he's just pretending and putting on a brave face for the people around him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's like once you strip away everything, what is there? And it's just this kind of coward of a man who's like, I just want to live life because I love my life, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, the robbery treats him, or teaches him, essentially, in the movie, that there's no point in trusting those men without honor. If there is something to pull away from that lesson there for him, but, you know.
Or maybe he should have provided the gift. Like,
yeah.
It's,
I mean, he did give him, like, 1 coin, but it was, like, it was nothing. It was 1 coin, you know? Like, that's not a whole lot.
Because I'm not sure how to read that guy that he comes across, like, I may have been tainted from seeing him in the trailer robbing Gawain, but I found him kind of sinister up front, but it could be that he's like, I'm just going to rob this guy on principle because I did him a favor and the favor was not returned.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's ambiguous, and so I think that's one of the greater things about this poem and this movie too, is that you can interpret it in a variety of ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it was written in Middle English. When I was doing my reading, I actually came across this interesting tidbit of trivia that the word for green in Middle English was actually very close to the word gray.
Huh.
So it could have actually been the Gray Knight, but we just misinterpreted it. But
yeah.
I like green a lot better. That's just like a small little thing. So I mean, you know, things could have been misinterpreted, but you know, that's the beautiful thing about literature, is that you can come at it from different angles. And the robbery, there's so many different ways to kind of interpret it. And even like the thing with Saint, or with the ghost, where she asks him to go into the water to retrieve her head. And when he does that, he pulls it out, and he's like, or I think it's before even, he was like, what will you give me in return? And she's like, do I have to give you something?
Yeah, exactly. Isn't she like, what a terrible thing to ask someone?
Yeah. Like, I'm a ghost. What do you want me to give you? Like,
yeah. Well, and also, this plays into the broader point of, this is not a movie that is interested in holding your hand. It presents its narrative in the way it chooses, and you are expected to accept things that, if you're like, I want my movies to be very logical, and I want the plot to line up beat for beat, it's like, this is not for you, if that's what you want out of a movie. Because, he goes into the water and gets her head, and then when he gets back up, his axe is there that the robber guy stole. And it's like, was the robber here before? Doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is, he failed a test earlier, and now he succeeded, and he has been rewarded by getting the thing he needs back. It doesn't really matter how it happened. That's not the point. But you are expected to accept a lot of things. Like, it starts off like grounded-ish, and then the Green Knight appears, and it's like, okay, that's different from the tone. But then it's like, okay, this is one fantastical thing, and then there's a ghost, and then suddenly there are giants, like just giant women walking across the landscape. There's a talking fox. There's that
weird things.
Yeah, and then that part in the robbery where he's tied up and the camera just slowly pans around, and you see him as a skeleton, and then it slowly pans back.
Yeah.
Which I'm not smart enough to understand what that was meant to be, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I was trying to think about that, and I mean, I guess it could, represent a possible future for him if he just kind of gave up right there and didn't like persevere to continue on. But yeah, I mean, exactly. It's really hard to interpret what that could mean.
Well, I guess it's a point at which he could have had an honorless death. He's on his way to death, but this death is one without honor because he forsook everything that he claims to stand for. And when he dies, presumably at the end, he has made a deliberate choice and he has earned his honor. And maybe that's the difference.
Yeah, I can see that. And I mean, kind of speaking on a similar note of like honor and chivalry, I'm just kind of pivot a tiny bit to talk about kind of the goals of these two works.
Okay.
So at least from where I'm sitting and the kind of research that I've done for this episode, it seems to me that these two works kind of had a different idea of what chivalry is. The poem, and especially when you take it in a historical standpoint, the poem aims to highlight the concept of chivalry more in a societal context. That chivalry was more of seen as a way to bind people together, to unite them behind a common code, to become like a kingdom.
Okay.
It's not exactly how we view chivalry today. I feel like we view chivalry as something that's like, oh, it's like light and dandy, and it's like, oh, it's holding the door open, and it's like, that's all good and well. But honor and chivalry in those medieval feudal times, it made all the difference between order and chaos back then. The movie, I think, clearly takes a more psychological approach to what chivalry is and what honor is. Which kind of creates a more difficult conversation about what it really is, because as we can tell, he fails a lot of his tests,
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're getting at, it has a lot of truth to it because the original story was written at the time, or during a time when there were knights and chivalry was a value that was upheld, but in reality it was all horseshit. Like, knights were fucking brutal to each other and to everyone else. Like, the idea of chivalry was a lie and then mythologized as time went on, and I think The Green Knight, the movie, has a more honest depiction of what the knighthood realm looks like.
Yeah, I would agree. It's ambiguous. It's like, you can't be entirely just and pure because perfection is an ideal that doesn't exist, Yeah.
Well, and even Joel Edgerton's the Lord, when he's at the castle, he basically like calls foul on the whole thing. It's like, what? So you go on this quest, you do this one thing, and then boom, you're an honorable knight right there. That's it. That's all you got to do. And I was like, of course that doesn't make any sense. It's like you do one good thing, and then you're an honorable man. Now it's like, no, it's a consistent like pattern of good behavior over the course of your life that gives you that reputation. It's not going on the quest, and we have this relationship with the quest story because they're fun and they're good, but it's like the character's life continues on after the quest that we see, and that's something a lot of viewers have a problem with, as if you remember the Star Wars sequel backlash. It's like, we saw the quest for Luke in the original trilogy, and then we saw him 30 years after the quest, and people didn't like it too much. Or some people didn't. I liked it. But it's like, it's like you have to understand the story is your little window into the character's life, and their life continues on afterward. And that's kind of the neat thing about stories, is we're getting a little snapshot.
Yeah, absolutely. We didn't see what Sir Gawain's life was like before this film.
Nope.
We can kind of assume it was more of the same of him just kind of fucking prostitutes and drinking a lot and stuff.
Yeah, he is like the medieval equivalent of a stoner burnout. Like,
yeah, it's a stark difference from the character that were presented in the poem, because like right from the get-go, or not right from the get-go, the first like two stanzas of the poem are like setting up the scene and everything, but like once we start to get to know Sir Gawain, he's already a knight, he's already a good guy, like, it's very clear that he's kind of like one of the better ones of the Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah, that's how I always remembered him. And he's Is Essel a character in the poem?
Which one is she again?
She's the prostitute that he sleeps with.
Oh, no.
Okay, well, that's a big difference right there.
Yeah. Yeah, as far as I could tell. I mean, there's he doesn't have a mom in the story, but I think he is somehow related to King Arthur, I think. I think he's actually like his cousin, if I remember right.
And in this, he's his nephew. Because in
Yes.
the movie, his mother is Morgan Le Fay, who is the sorceress sister of Arthur. And she is she's an enemy. She is Arthur's, like, one of his nemesis.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and Morgan Le Fay, yeah,
And Mordred is the other one, who is
Right.
her son, I believe.
Right. I don't know enough about all the family tree dynamics.
That's basically
Arthur
all I know.
times.
I remember, like, King Arthur pulls a sword from a stone. Merlin is around doing things.
Right.
Lancelot is Arthur's best friend until he sleeps with Guinevere. Apparently, they get over it at one point, and they become, like, allies again. And I also know that Morgan Le Fay is around. And I believe the Arthur story ends with him, like, being put into a tree with the promise that he will come again at some point in England's future.
That's neat.
That is from, like, me reading books in the second grade. That's the last time I engaged with that material seriously. So that's a very loose recollection of all that.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I appreciate that they still added in Morgan Le Fay into this film, but she just kind of took the role of his Gawain's mother in this story. In the books or in the poem, the entire plot is kind of formulated by Morgan Le Fay. She's she's magical. She's a witch, you know,
Right.
and she puts the whole plot into motion because it was kind of, I think, a test of Sir Gawain and maybe of King Arthur's court, but it was kind of weird, where it was like to scare Guinevere to death or something like that. I don't know why the poet put that in there, but okay.
Well, that didn't work, I guess.
Yeah, I know. Like, and it's so funny because, like, her reaction to the events of the Green Knight coming into the castle, her, like, Guinevere's reaction is just like 2 lines, and then that's it. And it's like, well, then what the fuck? Why was that even a goal? Like,
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because in the movie, Morgan Le Fay is like, her motivation is not outlined at all, and her actions create the entire plot. Like, it doesn't rely, like, you can view the movie fine without this knowledge, but, like, understanding elements of Arthurian legend and how these characters interact with each other it adds another layer that a casual viewer wouldn't get, especially since none of the characters other than Gawain and Essel have names. Like,
yeah, right.
Arthur is just king, Guinevere is queen, Morgan Le Fay is mother.
Yeah.
Because it's not really important. It's about Gawain, and he spends, like, kudos to Dev Patel. He does an amazing performance, spends most of the movie on his own, with very little dialogue. It is mostly him walking through landscapes and reacting.
Sometimes there's a little fox there, but
Yeah.
it's mainly him just walking around.
Yeah, I'm honestly kind of sad that they show the fox talking in the trailer, because the entire movie, I'm like, when's he going to talk? When's the first time he's going to talk? And he only talks the one time at the very end, the part that was from the trailer. So that was wild.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and you know, I'm glad that they made that choice too. But yeah, I wish that fox had a more pronounced presence, I would say. In the book or in the poem, the main mention of a fox comes during the final hunt, with the Lord going out and stuff, and he actually kills the fox.
Oh no!
So, yeah, not jazzed about that point in the film or in the poem.
Does the fox talk in the poem or no?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
But yeah, there's I guess we can talk about the stuff at the castle, because that takes up a big chunk of, like, this piece here, where Sir Gawain, he arrives at the castle, and it's just a few miles away from the Green Chapel, where he's going to meet the Green Knight to have his meeting there, and they agree to this exchange there between him and the Lord that anything, or the Lord's going to go out and hunt for the next several days because that's what he wants to do. Anything that he catches, he will give to Sir Gawain. But anything that Sir Gawain gets at the castle throughout the day, he must re-gift back to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have this mutual exchange, and it was interesting that they kind of carried that a little bit over to the screen, and that they showcased that main failure of Gawain's, where he came.
Yes, he
Yes,
did. Well, it's such a strange scene too, because like they build up the sexual tension that he is feeling, but then when she approaches him, like they're talking about the sash specifically the entire time, which is weird that because he lost the sash earlier in the robbery, and the sash his mother made for him to protect him, and he could come to no harm while he was wearing it, and that is incredibly important for the end of the movie. But it is odd, one, that she had it, the lady, and two, that they use desire for the sash as innuendo for their sex.
Yeah, right. It's uncomfortable.
It is a very uncomfortable scene, and it is played to emphasize Gawain's shame at doing it. Like, it's so fucked up that he does that.
Yeah, right. It's uncomfortable, and I mean, it's the chivalrous thing obviously would have been to say no, get away. I'm not kissing you. I'm not having sex with you. I don't care. That.
Well,
that
I mean,
literally,
like chivalrous knights play heavily like in the realm of Christianity, and one of the fucking 10 commandments is "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife."
Yeah, right. So literally, right there. How could you miss it?
It's like one of the most basic rules of that religion, and he fails pretty quick. Like,
he fails in the film really hard.
even when she like asks him like, "Why didn't you come to my chamber last night?" He doesn't say it's like because I didn't want to or because that would be dishonorable. He just like thinks he would have gotten caught, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he was like, it wouldn't have been. Yeah, like everyone. I would have had to give that to your husband later. That's literally the agreement we came to.
Well, he didn't even piece together the agreement, really. He was like, what would I get here? What would I get in this castle that I would give you? To the point where Joel Edgerton literally just kisses him in the face because he can't put two and two together. But I want to talk about the lady because both the lady and Essel, the prostitute who loves Gawain, are played by Elisa Vikander. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very interesting, and I want to talk about it. Why do you think that casting decision was made?
I think they made that casting decision because it creates a different dynamic for Sir Gawain, and I didn't even realize it at the time that it was the same actress. Mm-hmm. So my fault. But I think it makes it more difficult for him. It makes it more difficult for Sir Gawain to say no to something, or to like kind of recognize the wrong that he's doing, or recognize how he's failing in this test. That's kind of what I'm getting out of it. That it amplifies the challenge for Sir Gawain. What about you? What do you think it really meant?
So I think it had to do with how both society and Gawain see class and status, because they're played by the same actress, but he treats them very differently. Essel, he kind of blows off the entire time, and then the lady he's infatuated with and sort of enchanted by. And the flash forward, which we'll talk about, I think, in depth in a little bit, like, he impregnates Essel and steals her baby away and ends up getting him killed in a war. Like, and it basically shows how for a knight, you don't marry the peasant. You might fuck them, and you might like take their kid, but they don't get to like live that life. And I think it is sort of an indictment of that structure and his attitude towards a woman that he's like basically taking advantage of.
I like that. That's a really good interpretation. I think that's...
Thank you.
Yeah, no, because that kind of stuff would not have been in the poem. Like that's not
No.
that's not the story that they're speaking to, because they're trying to, or at least the author. I believe that the author of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight was trying to reinforce the ideas of chivalry,
Okay.
of kingdom structure, of that, like, there is this ranking order in society, and there's a reason why these people are why chivalry exists, why honor exists. There's a reason, and there's a reason why this structure exists. But yeah, that's a great interpretation to put forth there, because this is a modern retelling of it where we're more conscious of class and conscious of socioeconomic statuses and how that influences everyday life. So I think, that was a good interpretation of that character decision.
Well, and it just as we see in the flash forward thing we get at the end, it's like I forget exactly how to say it, but it's like once you morally compromise in like one area of your life, like you can say like, well, if this was fine, like this is kind of shady, but it's okay this time. And then next time you have another decision, it's like, but I did it last time. It's like, it's probably okay this time. And you can see how the moment that it's really the moment he runs away from the chapel that that is the event that turns his life into a complete downward spiral, where he just does worse and worse things, and everybody hates him, and eventually he dies alone by pulling off the ribbon, and his head falls off.
Yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
and also he takes Essel's baby and then immediately marries a noble woman from a neighboring kingdom or something. So he just throws her to the curb because he
It's totally fucked up.
Yeah, it is, but it's like that's what happened.
Yeah, totally. And I think that speaks to this one aspect of the poem, where it's this kind of failure of virtue, or the idea of Gawain's 5 virtues. It's this kind of really convoluted mess of like virtue stuff. Like it's kind of difficult to like piece out and stuff. But the author had this fascination with like 5s, with numbers, and the pentacle, the pentagram kind of symbol.
Yeah.
He really liked that, and that's that symbol that's on like his shield that he's carrying off to kind of battle. And I think it might have been on like something else in the film. I can't remember entirely. But Gawain has these 5 virtues reflected in the poem on the pentacle, which relate to his 5 senses, his 5 fingers, the 5 wounds of Christ, the 5 joys of Mary, and then friendship, fraternity, purity, politeness, and pity. It's these 5 virtues, and then these 5 other like all the 5 virtues have these sub virtues. It's very convoluted and weird. But it's kind of this idea of circular numbers.
Okay.
That if one virtue falters, if you falter on one thing, then the rest will fall. It's not that they all raise each other up.
Okay.
And they all rely on each other. Like that's what perfection is. That everything is working on the optimal plane. But if all of a sudden you're not pure, or you're not polite, or you don't believe in Christ anymore, the pentacle falls down. And everything just kind of falls. It fails. And I think that's kind of what. I don't even remember what I was talking about at the start, but I think it kind of
failure of virtue is what you were talking about.
The failure of virtues, and the failures that he went through in his own life, and I think that you kind of spoke to one of the virtues that he was failing on earlier, with like his piety, or like his fidelity, or how he cast the prostitute to the side in exchange for this more honorable woman.
Yeah, and I guess the downward spiral, or the potential downward spiral, because he does curb it in the ending of the story, but he like it starts with him not showing affection to the person who loves him, and then he's an asshole to the kids, and then he sleeps with the Lord's wife, and then he runs away from his challenge with the Green Knight. He doesn't really, but you want to talk about the flash forward for a little bit, because I think the flash forward is so it's like a dream sequence. It's not a flash forward, but
it's wonderful. It's beautiful.
It's this like elongated montage of him running away from the Green Chapel because he's not brave enough to be beheaded. Then he goes back to Camelot, I guess lies about the success of his quest. Arthur knights him. Arthur and Guinevere die of old age or illness or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So Gawain becomes king because Arthur and Guinevere have no heir, and he is the nephew of Arthur. And then he ends up embroiled in like constant war. He impregnates Essel, steals her child away from her. Kid grows up. Kid goes to war with him, dies. And I just love that like death glare Essel gives him from the crowd when he's walking back through the town. And everyone hates him. And then the enemies are at his gate. His wife and child leave to go run away or something. And then he takes off the sash, discovers it has encroached into him, sort of corrupting him from the inside. It kind of becomes like a branch type thing, like a big vine. And then when he pulls it all the way out, his head falls off. And then we cut back to the Green Chapel.
And then he's like, wait.
Yep.
Pulls off the sash, and he's like, now I'm ready. And he's like, good job.
Yeah.
You passed the test.
Yeah, the Green Knight is so friendly. And then he's like, off with your head.
All right, now we can begin. I love that sequence at the end because, it speaks to that idea of, like, the faltering virtue. If he runs away now, if he gives into his cowardice, and if he doesn't align himself with the honorable thing, which is to follow through on his word, then one thing's just going to lead to another, you know? One thing, he's like, oh, it was fine that one time, just like you were saying. It was fine, you know, when I made that one mistake that one time, it will be okay if I act
you morally
that same
compromise
way.
yourself. If you compromise on your morals once, you will do it again, and you will always do it. That's what it's saying, I think. And it will destroy you in the end. It will corrupt you, and it will destroy everything you are, is I think what that is saying.
Yeah, because, like, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it was just a game. You know, it was just a challenge. That's what the Green Knight said. He was like, you know, I want you to participate in my little game.
Yeah.
You know, come do this thing with me, and it'll be kind of fun. It's like there's no consequences, but the consequences are psychological. They're future consequences. You know, if you don't follow through on the game, you know, no one can say that you didn't because no one knows where the Green Chapel is. No one knows if the Green Knight really exists. You know, no one can call bullshit because they weren't there.
Yeah, and it's one thing I think is interesting too about the game. It's like Gawain knows the stakes going in. It's blow for blow. He didn't have to cut off his head. Like, he could have just gone for like a little slice on the forearm. But no, he goes for a kill, and so that like what he'll get in return. But the flash forward does one thing for the ending, which I think it shows that because you know if a movie ends with your main character about to be beheaded, it's like that's kind of a grim ending. But when you're just coming off of this very dark and upsetting flash forward for the rest of his life, then him being beheaded almost seems lighthearted. It's like, oh, thank God we're not getting that. At least it's this instead. He maintains his honor. And also it's what I love about it, the challenge, is it's the statement that it doesn't matter what you're doing, but you gave your word, so you have to keep it. Like the act of following through on your word has value in and of itself. Like if you make an agreement, follow through on the agreement. And it's like something that people do not do.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's like, you were just speaking to it. It's like, you know, an evaluation of your own self-worth. And, you know, this isn't for everyone else. This is for me. This is my personal challenge that I need to overcome here. And that's what I like about this movie is that it's psychological. He's not focused on, you know, what other people are going to think at this moment. He's thinking, how is this going to influence me? How would the decision to be a coward at this point and back out of the strike, how would that influence my character, my future, the future of my land, the future of my people, and the future of my kingdom as a whole? I did find this one quote that I really liked in one of the articles that I was reading, and it might have been from like a scholar or something, but it was like basically an abandonment of the attachment to ego itself.
Okay.
And I think that's a really good way to kind of phrase that final decision of his there at the end. I just want to also point out some differences about the final scene there where it comes back to the Green Knight. First and foremost, the chapel the chapel in the poem is not a chapel at all.
Oh.
It's an earthen mound containing a cavern. So it's very much like green. It's very much nature, which is kind of neat. And so he arrives at the chapel, he assumes a position. They have like this exchange of words and stuff, and he raises the axe, and Gawain flinches at the first swing. And so he's like, "Did you flinch? Like, are you ready?" Like they kind of have another conversation, and he's about his character and his strength. And he's like, "No, I'm ready." He doesn't flinch at the second one, but the knight withholds his full force to test the knight's nerve, to test Gawain's nerve.
Okay.
So he strikes, but it's not very hard. And this angers Gawain, and he's like, just get it over with. Just do it. Like, I'm here. I'm ready. Don't worry about my nerve. And so the final strike is delivered, but only a slight wound is produced. So we actually know what happens at the beheading. He only a slight wound on the back of the neck, and he is still wearing that girdle. The sash. He's still wearing the sash.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's some discussion about that. He had concealed the sash. Here's kind of the big kind of reveal too, is that the Green Knight is also revealed to be the Lord at the castle.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's very different.
Yeah, and so he kind of had instructed his wife to do all that stuff, with Gawain to test him, because it's a bunch of tests. So he instructed him to have those tests, and he's like he kind of reprimands him a little bit for wearing the sash, but Gawain realizes that fault, and he kind of is ashamed about it, but the knight kind of ultimately forgives him for it. Okay. Because and then later on, when Gawain returns to the court of Camelot, he talks about it with the other knights, and they encourage him to continue to wear the green sash as a reminder to always be honest. So, I thought that was kind of neat how different the ending was.
Yeah, that's super different. And also in the movie, we do not know if Gawain dies or not. I think the assumption is he does. Yeah. But I love that moment at the end where Gawain's like, "Is this all there is?" And the Green Knight's like, "Why would there be more? This was this is what we agreed on. This is what it is." Because I think it's because it's a question we as viewers would probably be asking too. It's like we're trained to expect, there's a little twist. Like he will be forgiven because he kept his word, or he'll outsmart him. Like in the book, it seems like it's kind of played as he outwitted him, or he thought he did, and he kept the sash on. It's like, no, it's just pretty straightforward. It's like you chop my head off, you come meet me a year later, I'll chop your head off, and that's the deal. That's all we're doing. And it's a nice exchange. The simplicity of all of it is very subversive for the fantasy genre, I think. It's like, one, his quest is ultimately meaningless to anyone but himself, which is like, take that against the Lord of the Rings, where the quest is like, you take the ring back or the world is fucking done. Yeah. In this, it's like, you might get your honor, you might not, you might die. That's it. Yeah. and then the Green Knight's just shrugging of like, why would there be more? Yeah, right. It's like, that's just all this is. It's just a game, and it's a test of your character. That's kind of what it is. It's a series of tests with the robbery, and then the scene at the lake, and then the events at the castle, and then this final blow with the Green Knight. It's all just a bunch of series of trials and tests for your own self-worth and your own chivalry and your own honor. Yep. And I can't remember if we already talked about honor, but a little bit. To me, If we did, audience, apologies. But to me, it sounds like the original story is very much about maintaining one's honor, and this story is very much about earning it, because Gawain is not super honorable, and at the end, he makes the honorable choice.
Yeah, I would say so. Throughout the story in the poem, he's always kind of presented as this honorable, kind of the best of us knights. And that's kind of what he's maintained to be. You know, he's always very courteous. He's always kind of the example of chivalry. It's just kind of that one failing at the end that he has by wearing the green sash. Like in the poem, he doesn't do anything with with the wife. Like whenever she kisses him, she kisses him 3 different times, if I remember right. 3 different times, and he gives all those kisses back to the Lord. Like he kisses him on the mouth and everything. So you know, it's very tit for tat, but the sash is the only thing that he really conceals, and that's kind of the only failing of his in the book.
Interesting.
But that's kind of glossed over really quick at the end.
Yeah. Well, I think we've pretty much covered it, right?
I suppose there are some other things that I could talk about.
I
if we want to.
apologize. Sure, go for it. I did not know.
No, I just wanted to talk about real quickly some interpretations of the poem, and maybe we could compare those to the story as well if we wanted to, but no real need to. But you know, the great thing about this story is that, you know, like I already said, it's Middle English, so there's some different interpretations of this from Tolkien and some of those other people who first interpreted it. So when you read it, sometimes you might get some different words in there and some different, you know, interpretations of the text.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's also another great thing about literature is you can always interpret something different out of it or extrapolate some different meaning out of it. So there are some people who interpret that the Green Knight, a very obvious interpretation, may symbolize the natural world. You know, because he lives in the ground, he lives in this earthen cave, he's all green, you know, and when he gets his head cut off, you know, his body still functions like a plant, you know, it still kind of survives and it picks up its head and it's like, I can regrow and everything. And so one way to kind of take that interpretation is like, oh, chivalrous knights have become a little fat and lazy, they're unaccustomed to the true weight and gravity of the world, you know, and this Green Knight is here to remind them, this is how the world is. Don't disconnect yourself from what is the world and what you should be doing as knights and stuff.
Okay.
I don't think that the Green Knight really symbolized the natural world in this film. I think it was kind of straight, or to me, it felt like very much a telling of Sir Gawain.
Well, I mean, think about it though. Like the Green Knight is made of like tree wood. And
That's
also
true, yes.
in the, it is mentioned in one of the marketing, like the Ralph Ineson narrated video about the Green Knight. He talks about how it is associated with respect for nature. So I think it was present in the subtext. It's not mentioned directly, but you know, he lives in his little like ruin. He's kind of blended in with the trees. He sounds like you know, he sounds like an ent when he walks.
I was just thinking that he sounds like Treebeard. Mm-hmm. But a lot more articulate and faster.
Yeah.
Than
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I would agree that theme of nature is definitely present through him.
Mm-hmm.
We did also talk about the failure of virtue and what perfection is. You know, with the different virtues kind of holding each other up. If one virtue fails, if all of a sudden he's a coward, or if he's not pious, or if he's not fraternal, or if he, you know, doesn't believe in Christ, the system falls.
Right.
So I think, you know, this film kind of speaks to that idea that perfection is unattainable, and we all strive for it, but none of us can really live up to that promise of perfection.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was some other interpretations that I came across in my research. Some interesting gender dynamics, too. We also kind of talked about this already with how, you know, he
Essel is treated.
Yeah, Essel is treated, and how he really sexualizes the lady of the house. One way to view it is that women may have kind of that ultimate power over a man, or the opposite. You know, man has the ultimate power over women.
Okay.
I think both interpretations are applicable, but I think in the poem, It's kind of clearer to me that women have the power over the men. Morgan Le Fay and the wife of the Lord are kind of interpreted as some of the most powerful characters in the poem because they have direct influence over the journey. Morgan Le Fay kind of creates the entire events of the series of the poem, and if the wife didn't do anything in the castle, then Gawain never would have been tested fully.
Right.
And the poem also focuses a little bit on some opinions, actions, and abilities of men. And then there's also, the romantic interpretation, like historically romantic, not like romantic.
Yeah.
Like,
The romance movement, right?
Yeah, the romance movement that Gawain's function is to kind of just stand out as the champion of the human race. That this is an ideal to strive for.
Okay.
I don't think that I see that as much in this film, clearly.
No, I mean, I think he does function as a stand-in for the human race, but not an aspirational one necessarily.
Yeah.
He's just like a guy.
He's very clearly a fuckboy, yeah.
Yeah. But it's like he stays out late drinking. He gets back and goes to his room and just sleeps during the day. He's not a knight.
Yeah, not yet at all.
No.
I did write something else down here. So those are some of the interpretations. I would encourage any of the listeners to just explore. There's a lot of neat interpretations of there. I would actually encourage you all to get this book. This is a good interpretation of it. This is J.R.R. Tolkien. There's an introduction by his son Christopher Tolkien, who actually just passed away.
Yeah, he did.
It looks like
in the last couple years.
That's unfortunate, but there's also this contains the poem Pearl, if I remember right, which is kind of like a follow-up piece, if I am understanding it correctly. Pearl and Sir Orfeo. I haven't read them myself, so I might read them, but they are attached somehow to this. And there's also some good notes in here to help you out with your interpretation of it, of Sir Gawain. And there's this whole, W.P. Kerr Memorial Lecture. So it's a whole lecture that someone wrote on this topic. So if you are interested in learning more about the vast interpretations and symbols of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, I would highly recommend looking into it. But I kind of wanted to pose, or I guess I could pose this question of what is honor to you, Dylan, if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh my God, I was not ready.
I know, sorry to get you off guard.
What is honor?
It's a tough question to answer because the code of honor in the poem and the movie, it's very ambivalent, and it's a difficult thing to put a star on and say this is what it is. This is the shining example because Sir Gawain is so clearly morally ambiguous in the film.
Yeah, I would say, just off the cuff, honor is one. It's about keeping your word. It is about helping those who you can, who are in need, and this is a genderless answer. It's not like men are honorable or whatever. It's just there are always people you can help. There are people who are less fortunate than you, and you should help them. And if you do, that is honorable. You shouldn't lie to people. You shouldn't manipulate people. Just operating with integrity and kindness.
Yeah.
I would say. What would you say, Niles? Since you put me on the spot.
Yeah, I mean it's so tough to answer, but I would probably say something along similar lines. Yeah, along similar lines, but I would also say there's an element of selflessness in it. Definitely. Honor is being selfless. Honor is recognizing your own self-worth and following through on your actions and not just saying that you did, and holding yourself to a code. I guess in the immortal words of Omar from The Wire, a man's got to have a code. A man's got to have a code.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what honor is supposed to be in a way, is that it's a code of conduct to hold ourselves to courteous behavior, but also, putting the needs of others a little bit above your own. Something like that. Yeah.
Well, there's a modern way to look at it with charity. Like if you donate to charity and you're like the name on the benefit or whatever, and you're on stage and you're getting a nice thing. It's like, that's not bad. You're still helping people, but you got to recognize at least a little part of that is for you. Like, you like the glitz and the glamour, but if you donate anonymously, then that is honorable because you have done something out of the kindness of your heart, and no one will be the wiser for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, it's also just like speaking to the idea of what it is to be good, what it is to be honest, not to say that being like a coward or being afraid or being fearful is necessarily like a horrible thing. It's all right to be afraid of certain things, but I guess this film and the poem are kind of putting forth the idea that you need to rise to the occasion, especially when you say that you're going to, and follow through on your word.
Right.
But yeah, I think as chivalry and all that, it's just a way to hold everyone together and kind of unite people together. Anyways.
Yeah. So that's The Green Knight.
Closing. Do you have any closing thoughts on The Green Knight then, Dylan?
Not really. Not that we haven't said. It's a great movie. It's I don't think it's going to be in theaters much longer. So if you have made it this far without seeing it, go see it. I think it would benefit from a big screen viewing experience. I will definitely be rewatching it many times over the years to come, and I'm excited to see more from everyone involved. Honestly.
Yeah, seriously.
And I hope it does well, because I'd like this to lead to a sort of renaissance in fantasy. You would think Game of Thrones would have, but it didn't. So
you got to blame season 7 and 8 for that.
Well, I mean, by that point, it had been on for 8 years. Like,
yeah,
you would think the popularity of the first 3 to 5 seasons would have led to some. I guess it led to The Witcher in a way, but like, there's more fantasy. Fantasy's good.
Yeah, and I'm all for exploring Arthurian tales even more. I don't know. I like those feudal times. I think they're fun tales to like walk through and enjoy and kind of look at the dynamics and there's so many more of those tales. With King Arthur and the Round Table. I'm sure that there's plenty of other Arthurian classic medieval tales like this from Chaucer, even, that would be fun to see on the big screen. So I appreciate seeing movies or seeing studios like A24 taking these older tales and exploring them and reviving them, and giving them a new spin on them too.
Totally.
Giving us this neat interpretation that takes more of a psychological approach to what it is to be a knight and to be honorable and all that stuff.
For sure.
But yeah, 100% agree. Go watch this movie if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, definitely worth the experience. Let's talk about what else we have been watching. Niles, what have you been watching, reading, playing? What are you up to?
Yeah, actually this last weekend, I finally got around to watching an old Disney movie called Anastasia. Or Anastasia.
Anastasia. It's not Disney,
Anastasia.
Actually. But
that's right, it's not Disney. It's what was his name? I forget. Don Bluth. That's it.
Yes, Don Bluth.
Don Bluth. My girlfriend just shouted it from the other room.
I heard her, yeah.
But yeah, we just watched that film. I'd never seen it before.
It's Fox Animation, so I guess now it is Disney, but it was not at the time.
Technically, yeah. But it was, I'd never seen it before. It was really neat, and that whole period of the Romanovs, the czars, the final czars of Russia, are very interesting to me. Like, I'd finally learned about them really recently, so I was like, let's watch this movie. I'd never seen it, and I was like, wow, they got a lot of stuff wrong about the Romanovs, but
well, I mean,
okay.
that's like classic. I mean, it's like classic Disney behavior too. To do that, to romanticize the fairy tale and all that stuff. It's a great movie, though, from what I remember.
Oh yeah, it was really fun, and I like the character dynamics. I would recommend checking it out if you haven't. I might have said this on the last podcast, but I've been watching or rewatching a lot of Community. Such a good comedy show. I love watching that show to death. I need to find something else to watch for sure. But I've been reading this and that, reading the Injustice comics. I finally got the last few ones for the year ones, so hopefully I'll get those ones finished before the animated film comes out.
Oh yeah, I forgot that's happening.
Yeah, and I've been watching some What If as well. But yeah, Dylan, what about you? What have you been reading, watching, doing?
Yeah, so I'm still watching very slowly New Girl that my sister started me on. That's fun. I like.
Nice.
It's nice to have a good sitcom to just pop on every couple nights.
Oh yeah.
And I have started reading Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. I'm almost done with Volume 2. It's really good so far. It's so interesting. Like, it's in the DC universe, but it's not really about any of the main Justice League characters. Like, you follow Morpheus the Dream Lord on his adventures. And the first volume is very much a quest narrative. He has, like, some things that were stolen from him that he has to get back. And the second volume, it's, like, very different. It's, and I have heard that it just kind of meanders and goes. And then at the end, you realize how it all fits together. But this is the first comic that I've read where I really, like, saw how much of a story can be told in a single issue. Like, there's one issue in Volume 2 where Morpheus and his sister, who is deaf, they're, like, interacting with people in the medieval times in a bar. And this one guy there, he's like, I am going to live forever. I will never die. And everybody in the bar is like, okay, man, shut up. And then Morpheus approaches him. And it's like, I'll see you back at this place in 100 years. And we'll see. Or no, he said, like, the guy says that to Morpheus. And Morpheus is like, okay. And then, so his sister, being deaf, grants the guy immortality, like, off screen. And then they meet back 100 years later. And the guy is surprised. It's like, how did you know this would happen? Blah, blah, blah. But the issue is they meet at the same location every 100 years from the Middle Ages all the way to, like, the 90s.
Wow.
And it's just watching, and that's the entire issue. It's just them meeting back up century after century and catching up on what the guy has done in the last century of his life. And it's so interesting.
That is so neat. I'd love to read that.
It's really good. I'm excited to keep reading it. I haven't gotten too much this week because of moving. But I've also been watching What If.
Oh, yes.
We can talk about it super quick because it's getting kind of late. But it's good. The first episode was the Peggy Carter as Captain Carter instead of Steve Rogers as Captain America. It was a little too similar to the movie for me to, like, really be blown away. It was good. Yep. Some of the voice acting was a little off, I thought, but
yeah, I agree. Yeah, it wasn't 100% there, and yeah, it just kind of felt like a retelling of the same story.
Yeah, but I would like to see Haley Atwell get the opportunity to play that character at some point in the future. The multiverse is opening up in Marvel now. We have the ability to do that. However, episode 2, which is the T'Challa becomes Star-Lord, that is like, watching that one, I was like, okay, this is fulfilling the premise much better. It's like it's executing the premise and fulfilling the promise of the series because I feel like we're going to have people who are listening who have not watched What If, so I don't want to spoil it. But the things that are different because T'Challa goes to space are very interesting and incredibly major shifts in the narrative. Like,
yes. It was very, I don't want to spoil it either, but there were several points throughout that episode where I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I want from this series. Show me new things.
It was so fun. And Chadwick Boseman, this series is his final performance as T'Challa. Sadly, he is apparently in 4 episodes. And what makes it really sad is on the red carpet of Shang-Chi, which is upcoming, the next movie, Kevin Feige was being interviewed, and he mentioned, because the What If episode 2 had just come out, and someone asked him about this version of T'Challa, and apparently when they were recording, Chadwick Boseman came to him and was like, I really like this voice of this character. I think it's really, really interesting. And so they worked with Ryan Coogler and were incorporating some of that voice into Black Panther 2. But
Hey, that's
well,
neat.
but Black Panther 2 is going to be very different now, sadly, because Chadwick Boseman has died. But it is one. It's really cool that Chadwick Boseman was able to have that conversation and influence the writing of the sequel at the time. But it's really sad we won't get to see it, obviously. But
I know.
what if it's cool?
What if it's very cool? Yeah, that episode met and exceeded my expectations. So I'm excited to see what comes next for the rest of the season.
Totally.
And yeah, so I guess that's like kind of all we got for this week. Dylan, do we have anything planned for next week, or are we?
Well, 2
TBD?
weeks from now, it's Shang-Chi.
Or 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Shang-Chi,
Shang-Chi comes out September 3rd or 2nd, probably, because it really comes out on the Thursday. Yeah, so we'll see that next week, and then we will have the Shang-Chi episode out on September 8th. So if you want to follow along, you could definitely go see that. And if you want to reach the show, email playpauserewindpod@gmail.com or #playpauserewindpod on Twitter. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. If I can find the handle, hold on. playpauserewind_pod on Instagram. And Niles, where can people find you specifically online?
If you guys want to follow me on Instagram for some occasional neat, weird, strange photography, you can follow me on Instagram at Niles Got No Styles. That's kind of all for now, but yeah, please follow Play Pause Rewind. We appreciate all the support that we've gotten so far, and yeah, always looking to grow and improve. Dylan, where can people find you?
So many places. On Twitter at D-Day Movies, on Instagram at DylanD1026, on YouTube also at D-Day Movies, and on Twitch at D-Day_movies. All of our stuff is linked in the description. Follow us wherever you'd like. Subscribe. Oh, yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, please. Give the video a like. If you are listening on a podcast platform and you like the show, leave a review. Apparently it helps a lot. I don't know how, but it does. And make your friends and family listen to it. They might like it too. So, but with that,
Force them.
yeah, we will see you guys 2 weeks from today, talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Have a good half month, everybody. Bye.
Bye.